I was 24 when my old man passed. Charles Evans, born and raised in Branson, Missouri, worked his knuckles raw building custom wood furniture. Kind of guy who'd fix your fence without asking for a thank you. When he died, it wasn't sudden, lung cancer, slow and cruel. But before he passed, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Ty, this house is yours. You take care of it like I did, and it'll take care of you. So we'll back that up." He left the whole thing to me, 3-bed, 2-bath ranch with a wraparound porch and a work shed out back. He made sure my name was stamped on every deed and document. Said the house should never leave the family, and I was the only one in it worth a damn. Mama? She wasn't the same after Dad died. We'd never been close. Not since I was about 10, and she started putting more stock in wine and her book club than in birthday cakes and bedtime stories. I tried for Dad's sake. But after the funeral, she barely waited 2 months before shacking up with some fella named Dennis, a soft-palm mortgage broker from Kansas City with a jawline that looked surgically sharpened. When she told me they were moving into my house, I laughed. Thought she was joking. But the woman had the nerve to wave the will in my face and say, "Your daddy might have left it to you, but I'm still your mother. Don't you think I deserve a little comfort after everything?" Comfort my ass. Next thing I knew, Dennis and his 2 greaseball sons were parking their souped-up sedans in the driveway like they owned the damn place. Mama changed the locks a week later. Told me I wasn't stable enough to live there, that it wasn't healthy for her new family. So I left. I packed up my clothes, my old guitar, and a couple of tools Dad left behind, and I walked out with my pride and nothing else. But here's the thing about getting kicked out of your own home. It doesn't just sting, it brands you. Every day that passed, I felt that brand burn hotter, and not once did I hear a sorry from any of them. Not even on Christmas. They thought I'd just fade away. They didn't know I was the kind of man who plays the long game. After I got tossed out like a bag of yard clippings, I ended up renting a basement studio behind this old widow's house near Springfield. Tiny place, creaky floor, smelled like mothballs and fried chicken grease. But the rent was cheap, and the landlady baked banana bread every Sunday. I counted that as a win. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't spend my nights crying into a bottle. No, sir. I went to work. First thing I did, found a lawyer. A real bulldog named Marshall Cobb. Practiced out of a strip mall between a vape shop and a taxidermist. Wore BOLO ties and talked like a man who'd sued his own cousin, and won. Marshall read the will, raised an eyebrow, and said, "They kicked you out of property that's legally yours?" I nodded. He just chuckled. "Well, hell, son, we're gonna have some fun." But here's the rub. Mama had squatted there long enough to make the legal waters murky. Marshall told me, "We gotta play this smart. Paper trails, timelines, leverage." So I started gathering dirt. Meanwhile, I took a gig managing inventory at a hardware store. Ain't glamorous, but it paid bills and gave me time to think. Nights, I worked with Marshall, documenting everything. Every withdrawal Mama made from the joint account before Dad passed. Every backhanded text she sent afterward. I even printed out her Facebook posts. The ones showing Dennis and his boys lounging around the porch with their shirtless beer guts hanging out like they were kings of the castle. Then, a gem dropped into my lap. Turns out, Dennis had a little side hustle. Some investment scheme, out of Oklahoma that had SEC red flags all over it. I found receipts, emails, even a half-baked website where he promised double your money in 90 days to folks too gullible to read fine print. And Mama? She'd posted about it on Facebook like it was the next Apple stock. Boom. Ammo. Still, I didn't fire a shot. Not yet. Timing's everything. See, while they were living large in my daddy's house, I was planting seeds. I built credit. Paid off my truck. Started making connections. Real estate folks, construction crews, a buddy in code enforcement. Told them I was planning a big flip project. They didn't ask questions. Just handed me business cards and said to call when I was ready. Then, one Friday night, after a few too many gas station coffees, I drove by the old house. It was around midnight. The porch lights were off. Dennis's rusted-out Dodge Charger sat crooked in the driveway. I sat across the street in my truck, engine running low, just staring at the place. You ever seen a place you loved rot from the inside? That house used to smell like fresh-cut pine and cherry pie. Now it looked like a back-alley frat house. Broken gutters, dead lawn, a busted screen door flapping in the wind. That's when I decided I wasn't going to just take the house back. I was gonna ruin every last one of them. The thing about revenge is it ain't a race. It's a hunt. And any good hunter knows, you don't scare off your prey. You bait it. You track it. You wait. So that's what I did. While Dennis and his freeloading brats were treating my house like a redneck Riviera, I started sending out anonymous complaints. Small things at first: zoning violations, unregistered vehicles, trash piling up on the lawn. Every week or so, they'd get a notice from the county. Then came the knock on their door. City inspector showed up one afternoon with a clipboard and a real itchy pencil. See, turns out Dennis had converted the garage into a rec room, hung up a dartboard, slapped some drywall around the water heater, and called it good. Problem is, he never pulled permits. Sloppy. That was strike one. Strike two came in the form of a little friend I met named Deborah, a sweet older gal who worked part-time at the county courthouse. Loved bingo and lemon bars. She also happened to handle public records. I brought her some pastries one morning and asked if she could dig up anything on Dennis. Couple days later, she slid me a file that made me whistle through my teeth. Dennis had 3 civil suits against him. 2 for unpaid loans, 1 for breach of contract. All settled quiet-like. But they painted a clear picture. Dennis wasn't just shady, he was dumb shady. The kind of guy who thought a handshake was legally binding and taxes were optional. Now, I had a pile of kindling. Time to strike the match. I called in a favor to a buddy of mine who worked pest control. Asked him to swing by their house, anonymously, of course, and do a courtesy check for termite activity. Totally legal, by the way. Turns out, their deck? Infested. The report landed in their mailbox the same week the city tacked a red warning notice on their garage. And oh boy, Mama was livid. I know because she posted one of her infamous rants on Facebook. Unfair harassment. We are decent, hardworking people being targeted. Decent? Huh? She must have forgot the time she told me I needed to man up and stop whining about getting kicked out. Or when she let Dennis call me emotionally unstable to my face while she sipped boxed wine and said nothing. Anyway, after that termite report, I waited. Didn't have to wait long. They tried to patch the deck with cheap lumber from a feed store and no permits. You already know what happened next: another fine, another citation. Meanwhile, I've been quietly working with Marshall, my lawyer, to prep paperwork to officially reclaim the property. The kicker? We weren't even gonna need a court battle. Turns out, my dad had written a clause in the deed that gave me full rights to reclaim the house if it wasn't maintained in good condition. That meant I could force an inspection. And if the place failed, I could file for legal repossession. All I needed now was a little chaos. So I gave it to M. The week after the termite report hit, like a slap in church, things started unraveling for Mama and her precious Dennis real fast. Dennis lost his part-time consulting gig. Word got around that he was under review for some sketchy dealings in his old brokerage days. A friend of mine in the industry tipped off the company he was working with, said something about pending civil liabilities. That little whisper was all it took. They cut him loose by Monday morning. Now here's where it got fun. I had Marshall file the first motion to claim my right to inspect the property. We got the date locked down, and I made sure they knew I was coming. I didn't want this to be quiet. I wanted him to feel it. I showed up in jeans, boots, and my dad's old flannel. Not a threat, just a reminder. Mama opened the door and just about dropped her glass of Chardonnay. Dennis came stumbling out behind her in gym shorts and a tank top 2 sizes too small, talking big like always. "This is harassment," he barked. "Dennis," I said calmly, "you're living in a house that doesn't belong to you. I'm here for a court-approved inspection. You can either step aside or explain to a judge why you wouldn't." He puffed up like a blowfish, then deflated with a huff. I stepped through the door like it was 1995 again. Same floorboards, same kitchen counter where I carved my initials. Only now it smelled like cat pee and microwave dinners. I took my time, snapped photos, jotted notes. That busted deck? Rotted through. Mold creeping under the kitchen sink. Dennis had upgraded the plumbing himself, used duct tape on a copper line. I nearly laughed. 2 hours later, I had enough evidence to make their living conditions look like a liability time bomb. We filed for immediate remediation. That meant one thing. They had to leave. Not permanently, yet, but long enough for the court to see the place empty and judge the damage fairly. Mama called me 3 times that night, her voice a cocktail of desperation and fake sweetness. "Tyler, honey, let's just talk." I let every call ring out. Dennis texted me something too inappropriate to repeat, along with a blurry picture of him flipping the bird from my daddy's front porch. I saved that one. Judge liked it later. Within a week, they were served with the order to vacate for inspection. They were told to pack up and be out for 48 hours. 2 days. Long enough. I didn't waste a minute. While they were gone, I brought in my guy from county health, a structural engineer, and a contractor buddy I owed a favor to. We documented everything. Unsafe wiring, black mold in the basement, a literal wasp nest in the attic. Took pictures, videos, signed affidavits. When the judge reviewed our claim, he didn't just agree they had to go. He ordered the house turned over to me immediately, pending a full hearing. And that was the first official nail in Dennis's coffin. Mama called me that night. I answered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't gloat. I just said, "Because you forgot who this house was built for. You treated it like a playground. And me like trash. I'm just putting it back the way it was supposed to be." She didn't say a word after that. Now that the court gave me temporary possession, Dennis and Mama had 2 choices: move out nice and quiet, or fight it and risk a full eviction on their records. Either way, the clock was ticking. And Dennis? Well, he ain't exactly the graceful loser type. Instead of packing boxes, he packed attitude. Started telling neighbors I was a bitter little boy playing lawyer, that I was trying to steal the house his family built a life in. Problem was, everybody in town knew that wasn't true. My last name's carved into the frame of that house, plain as day. So the more Dennis flapped his gums, the more folks started talking, and not in his favor. Then came the utilities. Mama never changed the gas or water over to her name. It had stayed under Dad's account, never got flagged, since I'd quietly kept a few payments flowing from a dormant trust fund Dad set up. But once I had legal possession, I turned it off. All of it. Heat? Gone. Water? Shut down. Internet? Canceled before you could say streaming password. Dennis threw a fit so loud it made the HOA group chat. Started hauling jugs of water into the house like he was setting up for the Oregon Trail. Mama had to crash at her sister's 2 towns over. You'd think this would be the point where they started seeing the writing on the wall. Nope. Dennis, genius that he is, tried to retaliate by reporting me for harassment, filed a complaint at the police station, said I was stalking them. Know what happened? Deputy Martin, same guy who coached my Little League team, called me up chuckling. "Tyler," he said, "you made Dennis mad enough to walk into the station in Crocs and yell about mold. You sure you don't want to run for city council?" I told him, not unless the pay includes a truck upgrade. Meanwhile, my court hearing was creeping up fast. I kept my head low, collected my evidence, and even got my county inspector to draft a formal statement, called the property unfit for long-term occupancy without significant repair. Marshall, my lawyer, grinned ear to ear when he read it. "They're toast," he said. "Only question is how burnt you want him." But I wasn't done. I remembered something my old man used to say: if a man doesn't respect what's handed to him, take it back with interest. So I did a little digging into Dennis's finances. That investment scheme he bragged about? Turns out he'd pulled money from Mama's savings. Her entire rainy day fund gone. Sunk into some crypto knockoff called Grizzly Coin. Want to guess what Grizzly Coin's worth now? Less than a gas station sandwich. Mama showed up at my door that weekend. Looked 10 years older and twice as tired. "You did this to us," she said, not crying, but close. I stepped out onto the porch, leaned against the rail, and sipped my coffee. "No," I said. "You did this when you let a clown like Dennis walk through my father's door and act like he built it." She didn't answer. Just stood there in her too tight coat like a kid who'd missed the bus. I didn't invite her in. Not out of spite. Just principle. She'd made her choice 15 years ago. I was simply enforcing the return policy. So the court date rolls around. I walk in with Marshall, cool as a fridge in a blizzard. Dennis shows up looking like he slept in his car, shirt untucked, sporting a neck tattoo I hadn't noticed before, probably fresh ink to distract from his sinking ship of a reputation. Mama sat beside him, quiet as a stone. Didn't even make eye contact. Now the judge? Old guy named Walker. Silver hair, no-nonsense attitude. The kind of man who calls his own coffee breakfast and thinks eye contact is legally binding. He starts reading through the evidence. Photos. Reports. Code violations. That pest control invoice. Then the cherry on top, my structural inspection report that basically said, this house is one winter storm away from being condemned. Walker took off his glasses, looked right at Dennis, and asked, "You did all this renovation without permits?" Dennis actually tried to smile. "I was just improving the property. For the family. Walker didn't even blink. Just said, improper work, no inspections, multiple citations. This isn't a family dispute, it's property neglect. And just like that, bang, the gavel hit. Full legal possession of the home is awarded to the rightful deed holder, Mr. Tyler Evans. Immediate removal of all unauthorized occupants is to be completed within 14 days. That courtroom was silent, except for the scribble of the court clerk's pen. Dennis looked like someone just told him Monster Energy was discontinued. I nodded once, didn't smile, just tipped my hat to the judge and walked out. The real fun started after. See, I didn't have to evict him physically. The ruling gave me that power, but I had other plans. I waited a few days, just to let the panic settle in. Then I sent an email, professional, polite, straight to the point. For the court ruling, you have until the 14th to vacate. If you need assistance finding temporary housing, I've included some local shelters and extended stay listings. Kindly do not leave any of my father's tools behind. They belong with the house. 2 hours later, I got a reply from Dennis. All caps. Spelled, "You're wrong" 3 times. Claimed I was sabotaging a hardworking man trying to raise a blended family. Raise a family? His kids were already long gone. One joined the military to get out of the house. The other got locked up for stealing catalytic converters. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. A week later, I drove by the house. The front yard looked like a garage sale exploded. Mattresses, bags of clothes, a busted treadmill, some cracked Christmas decorations. I saw Dennis sitting on the tailgate of his Dodge, smoking like it was his job. Mama was pacing the driveway, talking to nobody in particular, wearing that old fleece robe I swear she had since I was 6. I parked across the street, rolled the window down. Dennis looked up. I raised my coffee like a toast. He didn't wave back. Didn't matter. I was home. After Dennis and Mama hauled the last of their junk out, left tire tracks on the front lawn, like some toddler trying to leave a tantrum, I stepped onto that porch and took my first breath as the rightful man of the house. It smelled like mildew and failure. First thing I did? Grabbed a crowbar and started tearing down the garbage Dennis called home improvement. That man had turned the place into a Frankenstein of half-finished drywall, broken ceiling fans, and plastic, live, laugh, love signs Mama probably picked up at a yard sale. I worked alone that first weekend. Just me, a truck bed full of tools, and my old man's playlist cranking, through a Bluetooth speaker, Johnny Cash, Waylon, bit of Springsteen when I needed a boost. That deck? Gone. Rotted clean through. I ripped it out board by board, tossed it into a rented dumpster, then stood back and smiled. It was the first time the place started to feel like mine again. Over the next few weeks, I got serious. Hired my contractor buddy Wes to do the heavy lifting. He owed me a couple favors from back when I helped him rebuild his barn roof after a tornado ate half of it. Brought in new plumbing, fresh wiring, had the foundation checked, and got a new roof tossed on just before spring rains rolled in. Every single screw I drilled, every wall I patched, I imagined Dennis watching from a distance, seething in whatever low-rent motel he and Mama were holed up in. Now, in the middle of all this, word started spreading. Folks in town who remembered me from high school, from working the lumber yard, from helping sandbag during the floods, suddenly they were showing up with paint brushes, casseroles, cold beer. One guy even brought me a porch swing he made himself. Said it was a thank you for the time I helped get his cows out of the creek during that big freeze a few years back. I didn't ask for help, but help came anyway. And that's when I realized I wasn't just rebuilding a house. I was reclaiming my name. While Dennis and Mama were burning bridges, I was getting handshakes and Sunday invites. It felt good. Solid. Like standing on dry land after years of wading through muck. And just when things were looking up, I got a call. Marshall, my lawyer, chuckling through the receiver. "Ty," he said, "you sitting down? You're gonna love this." Apparently, Dennis had tried to sue me. Said I emotionally distressed him by reclaiming the house. Claimed I'd sabotaged his career and reputation. The court laughed it out before it hit a docket. But here's the kicker. During that mess, Marshall uncovered some interesting financial records. Turns out Dennis was collecting disability benefits on top of under-the-table cash. Claimed back problems, but had posted a video last summer deadlifting at a CrossFit event in Branson. Marshall handed that over to the fraud division with a bow on top. As of now, Dennis is under investigation. Mama? She's been couch surfing between her sister's place and an ex-friend's trailer on the edge of town. Word is, the sister's done with her too after she borrowed her jewelry to pawn for groceries. I never said a word. Didn't post online. Didn't brag. Just kept working. Porch got rebuilt. Kitchen's now better than it ever was. Even planted some tomatoes out back, just like Dad used to. Peace, my friend, peace started blooming right there in the soil. The day the investigation into Dennis became public record, I was sitting on the front porch swing, same one a neighbor built me, watching the sun dip behind the hills and sipping a bottle of ice-cold Lone Star. Felt like a scene out of a movie, the kind with dirt roads and a damn good soundtrack. News spread fast. Small towns work that way. You can't stub your toe without someone 3 streets over hearing about it. Folks at the diner started whispering. Sheriff's nephew let it slip at a gas station that the feds were sniffing around Dennis's past business deals. Turns out, his little investment firm had a whole lot more wrong with it than just bad crypto picks. There were falsified forms, forged signatures, and a few folks who were mighty interested in getting their money back. Mama, meanwhile, tried laying low. But hiding in a town like ours is like trying to blend in at church with a face tattoo. You just ain't invisible. Word got to me that she tried moving in with a high school friend over in West Plains. That lasted about a week before the friend caught her using her credit card just to buy essentials. Essentials being 2 bottles of boxed wine and a Bluetooth speaker. Now, I ain't a cruel man. Spiteful maybe, but not heartless. So I did something unexpected. I mailed Mama a letter. Handwritten. Real clean. You've burned every bridge and worn out every couch. I won't help you, and I won't pretend I'm sorry about it. The house is mine, legally and morally. You gave it away the day you locked me out. I suggest you find some dignity and rebuild something of your own. Lord knows I had to. No threats. No insults. Just facts, neat and tidy. Never heard back. Didn't need to. Because about a week later, I got a call from one of Mama's cousins down in Joplin. Ty, you won't believe it, she said between chuckles. Your mom tried telling the preacher's wife she was a victim of property theft and needed a place to stay. Preacher's wife showed her the door and said, "Don't you got a son with a house?" I just smiled and hung up. Meanwhile, life was finally humming. I started renting out the 3rd bedroom to a travel nurse passing through town. Good lady, paid on time, even helped plant some herbs in the kitchen window. The extra income went straight into the savings account I opened under Dad's name. A little symbolic nod to the man who built everything I now stood on. I even took on a side gig with Wes, helping him restore old farmhouses on weekends. Wasn't about the money, it was about the work. Feeling useful. Tired hands, full heart. One Saturday, as we were loading tools into the truck, Wes looked over and said, "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd just let it go?" I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, I'd be working at a gas station, renting a shoebox apartment, and wondering why life felt like somebody else's. He nodded. Well, here's to not letting it go. Clink beer bottles like a couple of old coots. Spring rolled into town slow and warm, like an old dog stretching in the sun. Birds chirping. Mower engines humming up and down the block. You know the sound. It's the Midwest saying, "We made it through another winter." I stood in the living room one morning, barefoot on the hardwood I'd refinished myself, mug of black coffee in hand, and realized something strange. I wasn't mad anymore. Not at Mama. Not even at Dennis. I'd spent years carrying that weight, thinking revenge was the only way to even the score. But turns out, once the dust settles, once the locks are changed and the bills are in your name again, all that hate just sorta dies on its own. I was free. That house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. I painted the front door fire truck red, just because. Got an old hound dog from the shelter, named him Diesel. He barks at squirrels and sleeps like a rock. Best roommate I ever had. The travel nurse I was renting to. She ended up introducing me to her cousin, Jenna, worked part-time at the library, and ran a side hustle refinishing antique furniture. Tough, funny, no-nonsense type. First time we met, I spilled sweet tea on her boots and she called me Mr. Butterfingers for 2 weeks. I asked her to dinner anyway. We've been going steady since. Now, don't get me wrong, life wasn't suddenly perfect. I still had days where I caught myself looking out across the yard, remembering how my mom used to plant tulips by the fence line, back before the world went sideways. But I didn't let it linger. Sometimes closure ain't about getting an apology. Sometimes it's just knowing they can't hurt you anymore. I went back to see Dad's grave that May. Cleaned the stone. Left a 6-pack of his favorite beer and one of those crumpled photos we took when I was 10, me, him, a hammer, and the skeleton of the very porch I was standing on now. I kept it, Dad, I told the stone. And I didn't just take it back. I made it better. I think he'd be proud. He was the kind of man who believed in earning what you keep. And I earned every damn square foot of that house. Not through shortcuts. Not by begging. Just work. Real, honest, blisters on your palms kind of work. You know what that gives a man? Peace. Not the kind you post online. The kind that sits in your bones and doesn't rattle, even when the wind howls.